Welcome back to Dajiban Life, and today I actually have some content for you guys. I'll be replacing my shock extenders. The reason I'm recording inside the van right now is because it's kind of windy outside, so there's going to be a lot of wind noise. So the audio is going to be a lot better in here. But basically I noticed that one of my driver's side shock extender in the rear had kind of broken and come loose, and so it was still working. But I figured I would just go ahead and replace those with the style that I know will work, versus the last time I bought kind of the H pattern style where the shock extender is more of an H shape, and it was the wrong size, and so I had to cut it down and weld it like with my ghetto Harbor Freight welder. And it wasn't very strong. So this time I got the ones that I think will work. So I think I might have to drill new holes here to connect to the shock mount, but once I do that, I think these will be pretty solid. I believe they're the correct size as well, but I guess we'll see once we tear into it. So let's go ahead and do that. Alright, so here we are under the van. What's nice about this is I don't have to lift it up on a jack to do this. Should be pretty straightforward. Just need to loosen this bolt here and then a couple bolts over here. As you can see, this is kind of like the arm style, which is different from this style. It's more of a straight. So I think this one's going to sit more like that, right? So the shock will be a little shorter, but it should be a little bit more straight up and down. I mean, it's still going to have an angle to it, but I mean, that should dampen better. So let me go ahead and take these guys off and loosen the shock up, so then I can mock this up and see where I need to drill the holes. Alright, so as you can see here, the old shock extender actually broke apart because of my crappy welds. I think I might have not sized the perch properly either. I think it was a little bit too narrow, and so just jostling around the van, it probably broke it apart because of all the movement and stuff. We're back under here. It's kind of dark, so hopefully you guys can see that, but there's the shock mount. Right. This is going to be the new one, and yeah, that's not bad, but let me go ahead and then figure out where I need this thing to be, and then I'll show you guys what I'm doing. Alright, so it looks like drilling all three holes, so new holes will probably be work better. So I've already got this one punched out. I'm gonna go ahead and drill that one first. That connects to the bottom side of the shock mount, and then mark and drill the other two after. So let me go ahead and do that. Alright, so that's drilled out. It's a little close to the other hole, but it really doesn't matter because the side bolts will kind of help keep it in place, even if that it's basically just widening the channel, right? So it has a little bit more movement, so it should be fine. So let's go ahead and test fit that, and I'm going to mark the holes for the sides. Alright, so I got the holes for the sides marked out. I basically took a Sharpie and just traced the hole shape from the inside, and obviously since I can't drill from the inside out, I just did a rough kind of like just drew some lines from the center point, and then, you know, around, and just kind of eyeballed it. Obviously it's not going to be spot on, but I'm going to drill out the holes a little bit bigger than what the screws can go through, so that there's a little bit of room for error. So got the holes in the side drilled out a little bit bigger than they need to be. Hopefully that'll, you know, sort of correct for any miscalculations I may have had. Just looking at it, I mean, they seem pretty, you could kind of see through. Obviously it's not one bolt going through, it's going to be two bolts, one on each side, that are holding it in place, so it should be good. Alright, well, there it is with it all installed. I just had to use one washer on this side. get rid of this. Yeah, I just had to use one washer over here, and the rest of it is pretty straightforward. Had to finesse one of the bolts in because the hole wasn't lining up correctly, but you know, at the end of the day, it's good. So, and I reused some of the hardware from the previous shock extender setup, where they used the block instead of a nut, a threaded block to hold the bolt on the bottom end in. I don't know if you guys can see this. I'll give you a better angle in a second. But basically, this style of shock extender follows the same line as the old one, and it just sort of moves the shock more than extends it, like the position of it a little bit forward more, so that it's not as angled. And like here would be more of like a 45, and right now it's sitting more at like maybe a 15 to 30 degree, right? So it's more straight up and down, which improves the performance of the shock, but because it doesn't extend down as far, there's less travel. So I'm not sure what these markings mean. There's markings on the shock here. I don't know if you can see that, but there's some lines there on the shock, and I think the bottom line means that's the max compression on the compression stroke. That's the max it can compress before the shock basically explodes. So I'm a little bit worried about that, because before I had about 2.5 inches of travel before the bottom of the sleeve would hit that line, but now there's like about 1 inch. So I lost 1.5 inches with these new style of shock extenders versus the H style that I cobbled together. So that's a little bit worrying, but my bump stops, if you can see back there, are trimmed down right there. They're trimmed down so that there's only about a 2-finger space between the bump stops and the axle, and that's what, about I don't know, maybe 2 inches at the most. And there isn't any marks on the axle of the bump stop actually hitting it, because usually when bump stops hit, it'll create like a little shiny area on the metal. So it seems like my spring setup here, with the helper spring on it and everything, has been stiffening up the rear enough so that the bump stop doesn't actually hit the axle, which is about 2 inches away, like I said, 2-inch space. So even though I only have maybe 1 inch of travel here on the shock, I don't know that it'll actually go that far. I don't think that the rear is really compressing all that much, honestly. I guess I'll find out, and if my rear shocks pop, I guess I could just buy shorter ones that are a little bit shorter than these, because these are almost all the way compressed. It's really hard. There's a point in the shock where it gets hard to push them in anymore by hand, and I hit that point, and it was about 1 inch off before I had to use like an actual hydraulic jack to push the shock the rest of the way up into the mount here. So that means probably there's maybe 1 inch to 1.5 inches of travel left before it bottoms out, you know what I mean, like I said before. And so hopefully it doesn't bottom out, but if it does, like I said, I'll just replace these shocks. They weren't that much. I think these in particular cost $60. So I'm gonna go ahead and call that done on this side. It's very clean, cleaner than the H style, although the H style is better, because the H style actually brought the shock down to about here, right, instead of where it is now. And so down here it had more travel. Obviously it had a good amount of travel, and it was more, you know, straight up and down. So all in all, the H style is probably a better setup, just because of the way it moves the shock rather than just extending out the existing shock mount on the same plane, on the same angle. But this is a lot cleaner install. It actually fits. I don't have to do any cutting or welding. I just used a spacer here to sort of, you know, to kind of pitch down on the shock mount. And yeah, well, I guess we'll just see how that goes. And if it doesn't work, then like I said, I'll just get new shocks. So it's not that big of a deal. So let me go ahead and do the other side and wrap it up. Alright, well, here's a look at the other side. This one's still intact. My welds held up. Look at this gross, ugly welds. But they held up, and it's still in one piece. So this side was working. I just think that when I did the driver's side, I cut this middle piece a little bit too narrow, and so it was actually working against itself, if that makes sense, and ripped the welds apart. Alright, well, there it is, all done. Both sides. Super clean install. Pretty easy. Just had to drill new holes for the mounts, and just use one washer on each side, on the inside, right? Just to fill in the space, and the rest of it just pinched together, honestly, pretty nicely. So, for whatever reason, I think because the gas tank's on this side, this shock is actually a little bit more compressed than the passenger side shock. So I think that side of the van is actually a little bit higher, probably because there's less load. I do have a full tank of gas, so as the gas tank empties, this side should get better and should get more travel. I think it's time for a test drive, I think. So let me go ahead and clean my stuff up, and we'll go for a test drive on these and see if we get any loud bangs and pops. Maybe blow the shock out here for fun. But yeah, let's see. Alright, so here's the test drive. I think the springs that I have are so stiff that it's not going to make much difference. Pretty bumpy there. Don't really notice much of anything. Seems a lot stiffer on the driver's side, just because that shock is probably compressed a little bit more than the passenger side because of the weight. I've got my fridge on the driver's side, also my battery, the solar generator is on the driver's side. It's a lot of weight on the, and I'm also sitting on the driver's side, so there's a lot of weight on the left side of the van. Feels a little bit stiffer on that side, but yeah, it's pretty much the same. Alright, well, that's pretty much it. Don't really feel a difference. I don't know, it's pretty noisy. I don't know if you can hear me during the test drive, but basically I couldn't tell a difference from before. It's more of a peace of mind repair, because that one shock mount on the driver's side was broken, and so just replacing that. It should be pretty solid now, no issues. I am a little bit concerned about the shock mount, moving the shock so the stroke is a little shorter than it used to be with the H-style shock mounts, but I really don't think it's going to make that much difference. I think my springs are stiff enough to where it's going to control a lot of that compression, and it's really not going to have much of an effect, except maybe when the gas tank is full. I'm also loaded down pretty heavily. I have a lot of crap because I'm van life, but so once I get rid of all this stuff inside, and the van gets lighter, and I just use it as a regular cargo van, it should get a lot better. So I'm not really too concerned about the stroke at this point. I guess I'll find out as I drive around. There are a lot of potholes in the area that I live, and so if I hit them and it compresses really severely, it could bottom out and burst. But then I'll figure something out. I'll either purchase a shorter shock, probably is what I'm gonna do, or I don't know. I honestly don't think the shocks do all that much on this van because of how much I reinforce the springs. I mean, they're 3500 springs plus a spring helper on there, meant for I think a Toyota Tundra or something, like super heavy duty. So I mean, the rear is super stiff. Even when I go over speed bumps, usually there's no movement at all. I kind of like that stiff feeling, so I actually think it's better than being super bouncy and cushiony. That's kind of how the fronts are. So I've had a couple of viewers message me about the front springs. I guess the 7390s that I have now, they don't sell those anymore. They're discontinued. I don't know exactly what truck they're for. But I had a viewer actually order the 7392s, I believe, and he said those were great. So I know there's also a 7394 spring, and I'm assuming each like number, like the different model number, just means that the spring rate is a little stiffer. So I think if I were to redo my front springs, I might try out the 7394s, the Moogs, just for a little stiffer spring, so that like I like how my van rides. It's very smooth and comfortable, but it is a little bouncy in the front. Not like super bouncy. It feels like a passenger car, basically, right? It feels like a Toyota Camry or something, like an older one. The newer ones are a lot stiffer, but I prefer a stiffer ride, and the fronts for me are a little bit too soft. Like I said, it is comfortable, but I don't mind a little bit of, you know, like feeling the road a little more. So yeah, you know, whatever. You know, hindsight is 20/20. But if you're looking into lowering your van, then yeah, I would definitely recommend, you know, maybe a higher spring rate. I don't know exactly how that works out, what the model numbers actually mean, but that's what I'm assuming. And then for the rear, for the shocks, if I don't think you really need shock extenders, honestly, because the original shock mount, right, the OEM shock mount on the axle, it's not that much difference distance-wise. It might be slightly shorter than where my shocks are mounted now with the extenders. So the style of the extender definitely matters. I think the H style is probably better, but the H styles that I've bought, I guess I've only bought one really, but the one that I bought was way too wide. It was for a shock mount that was probably like 2.5 to 3 inches thick, versus the ones I have are very skinny. They're maybe like 2 inches thick. And so the shock extenders, the kind that I bought, that's one piece, I thought that would be stronger anyway, just because, you know, I'm not cutting and welding them. So, and they seem to be about the right size. I just needed a spacer, a washer on one side, just to close the gap a little bit, and then pinch it shut. So that should last forever, pretty much. You know, I don't think there's going to be any issues with that, unless one of the bolts fall off or something. But even then, it's held in by 2 points. So 2 points of contact is plenty. Even 1 point of contact, because I used the old hardware. With the H style, they sent me a big block, a threaded block, that goes into the original shock mount, where it clamps the extender and the shock mount together. And in the hardware kit that the new shock mount that they sent me, there was only a nylon threaded nut, a lock nut basically. And so, you know, you could use washers. It's kind of the same thing, but that block is definitely going to, you know, add a lot more like clamping force and stability. So even with that one bolt, it should be fine to hold that thing on there because of the block, like I said. But yeah, I mean, like I said, it's more of a peace of mind repair. I don't really have to worry about it anymore. The only thing I need to worry about is going over big bumps at high speed. I should probably be careful anyway, and drive the van more like a lowered vehicle and slow down, you know, for dips and bumps and stuff, which I do sort of. So you can't really drive it like a truck, but you know, whatever. I think it's fine.